Hello.
Does it violate copyright if I sing it? Even if it's as
Well,
good
you
as the original.
sing it significantly off key, so I think we're okay because you're not hitting it.
No
AI.
algorithms
I'm
picking
kidding.
that up.
I wouldn't know.
New. Welcome to the HPTV podcast with Mitchell, Jaime, and Steven. We are here to discuss The Prisoner of Azkaban, but first, Jamie has a treat, a gift from her husband, really, that is going to expand our world of butterbeer food.
My husband was very excited for me to try these butterbeer fudge stripes, which I will say, I like the regular fudge stripes. Remember Mom used to always get them when we were little?
They
we
were
were never allowed to have them.
Cookie things she would have around. They were really good.
Yeah, we would sneak them.
Didn't they have a hole in the middle? Because I like to put them on my finger and...
Yep. This and black... Remember she would always buy black cherry soda and we'd have to sneak it. And now I'm like, ew.
She thought she was hiding it from us, but it was just forbidden. That's what made it good.
So these smell very butterscotchy, woo! But, it just broke.
If you're into chewing ASMR, here you go. If you have misophonia, run.
It's pretty good. It smells a lot stronger than it tastes. Oh, there's a hint of vanilla cinnamon at the end. It's actually pretty good. I'm kind of surprised.
That's a good twist on, can't just be butterscotch. That's a lot of the recipes for butterbeer early days were literally just butterscotch and cream soda.
Sorry, I'm going to move the package real fast. It's really crinkly loud. Better than I thought. Actually pretty good.
Well, now I'm bummed that we're all different states/countries because I want to try some.
I know.
Ship those over my way, Jamie.
A big grocery store and see if we have anything. You'd think the home of the series would have some good options, but Steven, are you going to have a taste for us next week? Are you going to be able to hold off eating what you have in the mail?
That's the question. No, I ordered them and they were supposed to arrive today, but they're not here yet. So yeah, now I'll have to hold off for a week. It's going to be tough.
And hide them from your children?
Yeah, what I'll have to do is have my wife hide them from all of us, is what'll happen. Because if I know where they are, let's be honest.
Well, when Steven was visiting here over Christmas, you bought Oreos for yourself or something? I can't remember what it was. And you got so mad because your wife and kids ate them. Oreos are the hardest thing to find.
So part of it's we grew up in a big family, right? There were 6 of us plus our parents. So we would get things like Costco and Sam's Club sized and these massive, but we I don't know, I feel like we knew to a degree, eat a little bit at a time. That's not my wife's philosophy. So I'll get a big old size whatever. And once it gets opened, that's all they eat for 24 hours and it's gone. And I'm very upset because I don't get some most of the time. I'm working and stuff, and I pay for all this crap, and they don't save me any.
No, I can't. Separate from the fact that I just really like food and eat too much of it, I cannot have cookies or chips. If they are, the most self-control I can have is having some every day. But there's not Oreos are going to sit in my cabinet for a week, and then a week later I'm oh, yes, some Oreos today. If I have snackables, they are in my brain to be eaten. It's a problem, but I don't get people who are I just have a snack cabinet and I just nibble in it once in a while.
I do that sometimes, but it just depends on the thing because there's some things. I had some Ben & Jerry's in my freezer that I bought Saturday. I had to eat that whole thing over the weekend. It was just there.
I believe your Instagram post showed 3 Ben & Jerry's, Jamie.
I only ate one of them so far. And I shared a little bit with the kids.
It is hard when you have a big family because I don't do this intentionally, but if there's something I want that Hannah doesn't like, it kind of means I don't have to worry about it. Whereas if she gets something I like, I'm you need to clarify for me how much of this you're going to need.
Well, Steven was a big hoarder in our family. He would hide things from us.
Once you had your own room and your own money in our house, it was on. Goodness forbid you hide something in the fridge because Steven will find it, as Denise found out the hard way.
It's my favorite Friends quote by Ross. He says, I grew up with Monica. If you didn't eat fast, you didn't eat. And so I took that to heart. It wasn't that we had one person, but there were 8 of us. So things got eaten. And so, yeah, I'd have to, get mine and then hide the rest.
Well, still to this day, this was an issue in our marriage. I mean, not an issue, a big fight or anything, but when you have leftovers from a restaurant, like remember how we used to always write our name on the box?
Oh, yeah.
Like my husband would eat the leftovers before I could, and I would like, what are you doing? Why'd you just eat like because there's like you want those leftovers like the next day you're going to be craving them, and I'll purposely not finish my food at a restaurant to eat the leftovers the next day, and he had to learn the hard way.
Better
do not do that.
buck.
So now I write my name on it, even though we're the only two adults.
But no, we did have our older sister, Mitchell, mention that. Hopefully she never watches this. But when she was like one of the first was like get a job, and she'd like buy her own stuff that had to go in the fridge, and she'd put on there like touch this and die, and threaten our lives and stuff like that. And we believed it. We were very careful of her things because
except for that cake that one time, Stephen.
I don't remember this. Can you share the story? Remind me.
Yeah, I swear we talked about this recently, like within the last couple years. But she had like a cake from something, and we were all forbidden to touch it, and someone ate it. And Mom was like, "You all have to stay in the basement until we know who did it." And I took the fake blame just because I didn't want to be grounded anymore. And I was like, "But I only ate part of it." I think that kept you guys grounded. But
just for the record, the basement was a finished basement where our bedroom were. It sounded like we were locked in a dungeon.
They chained us to the radiator. That's but yeah, I remember I was allowed to go play with my friends and ride my bike, and I never did actually have any. And I think like 10 years later, Steven told us it was him.
Well, I did accidentally set our parents' carpet a little bit on fire one time, and I held my guns until Steven took the blame. So, karma.
I think I dented like a wheel well of one of the old crappy cars once. And they're like, "How did that happen?" But that was less accused. No one was in trouble for that one. But if we're confessing things. Anyway.
Well, that was the beauty of having our old beat up cars. You get one more dent and you can't even tell. So it didn't matter. I worry about that now. I have like a car without dents. And I'm like, if someone bumps up against this thing, I'm going to.
I know getting new nice things is like, I almost love that my phone's only like 6 months old, but I can like throw it now and not be worried about it. Those first weeks, you're like precious. Yeah. And like the first time I got a nice car, not even a nice car, a car that was like 3 years old, but it was new to me. I treated that thing so nice. Anyway, none of those crimes would land us in Azkaban. What a transition. We're talking about Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, Book 3. We've all watched the movie recently, and we're going to talk about what they did good and bad and what we need to see done differently in the television show adaption. So I guess first out, where does this one rank for you guys?
Okay. This is hard for me because watching it, there's things that are better than the first two. There's things I really dislike. I think it was more watchable than the first two. In some ways, like the first two, I just felt like they were kind of dragging for me, but it's also because I know the content so well and I know what's going to happen. But this 4 and 3 for me kind of go back and forth. I think this would be 7 or 8. So 4 and 3 in some ways go back and forth. I know. But I have it right now at 7, but I started watching the beginning of 4 and I actually really love the beginning of 4. So it's hard.
I think that about 3, like watching it again, I was like the first like 2 acts I thought were much better than I remember, but like they did not bring it home in the end. Like you just end it so confused and like what is going on. And I get like the production design is pretty different and stuff, but in a way it's good having just watched the other 2 because it's like a departure. By the way, you 2 are completely frozen right now, so hopefully this all shakes out in the end. But I kept my ranking from last time where it is dead last. I have it in last place. But it's I don't know, I think part of it is it's due to the story itself from the book, and then we'll get into this. But just like at the time reading it, it was like my favorite book, and in some ways it still is my favorite book because of just like the experience of like reading it the first time. But it opens up so many like problems and like plot devices for the future that like once you introduce time travel, like nothing else matters really, and it's like we can go back and fix it. So that I later came to understand was a bigger problem. But just the way the film, like, I don't know, it was so different and it was too different and they don't bring it home in the end. And it ends up very convoluted, I feel like. It is, you compare the others, I feel like the others just have more pros. And this one just ends up with a longer list of cons, so it ends up in last place for me.
Well, you're wrong. I think it's third or fourth. Maybe it's some recency bias, so let's say fourth. Here's why. Because it is a huge shift from the first two. And it is stylistically so different from the rest, which is, like, not great, not cohesive, but you don't ask Alfonso Cuaron to come in and not do something interesting and original. And actually, I just don't know why you don't like the tone, Jamie, because he kind of takes it in, like, this more whimsical, slightly dark way of it. And so, yeah, the time travel that's J.K. Rowling's fault. Also, I love the ending. I think it's a hard one, and we'll talk about this with the show, to put on the screen because it is revelations of people talking. And I think coming off of a kids series where there's kind of been these action-oriented endings for the first two books / films, it's hard to have talking in the Shrieking Shack and essentially having two climaxes, because this is a little bit of a different rhythm to the last third of the book, because I think I looked in, it was with 1 hour left is when they go in, and you got to think a lot has to happen to be revealed and then kind of go back and have the time travel again. Also, Harry's biggest expecto patronum is not at the very end, it's earlier, and that bothers me. Anyway, I really like the production design. Even I'm glad that wasn't the tone throughout the whole films, because I think that is a different series of films. But I just thought it was whimsical, and it was, I don't know, whimsical might be a strong word, but it had some quirkiness and zaniness that really worked for me. And I enjoyed it as it went along. It hops and skips around a few things that I think could have been valuable and would have been kept by other directors. But overall, and I think partially because it is one of the better books when you really break it down, and it is the last book before the world really breaks open into kind of the war. I know Goblet's innocent through most of it, but yeah, and it's the only ending without Voldemort, so I kind of like it for that reason, that it's a bit smaller stakes. It's really about Harry finding something out, and so that is the story. And other than I don't love the werewolf production design, I think they nailed a lot of it, and it felt so unique.
Can I just say, I mean, and also when I started researching about this movie, and I think it's because I come from a film background, I have a lot of people in my life who love this movie, I think because Alfonso Cuarón directs it, and I love him. Like, Children of Men, amazing movie. I even love Gravity, even though people have issues with it. What's his first movie, which I loved? I watched like 50 times in film school. E2, Mama. I can't speak Spanish.
Tambien. Yes.
Tambien. So not an issue with him. And he hasn't spoken directly about Harry Potter, but he did do an interview one time where he talked about like the pull of going from like small budget, more independent things to the pull of like this huge movie. He didn't name the movie, but come on, it's Harry Potter. And how like there was difficulties with that because you're trying to make production happy. People have their opinions and all that kind of stuff. But I do feel like some things were planted in this movie that go throughout that I love, especially the style of certain things about the castle, the look of it. But I feel like it was too much. And I do think it's good that the next two directors could pull down from that, like, and overcorrect maybe in some ways or correct in some ways. But I just feel like it's so different from the first two films, and some changes were necessary. The kids are maturing and growing up. I feel like it's a little awkward in adolescence, the movie overall, which kind of reflects the kids at this time. But it's so different, and like it's
jarring.
Yeah, it established elements throughout, but it took really big leaps in some ways. And it was the first sign to me, and like what defines this movie for me is that those big film movies, film moments and set pieces were more important than the consistency of the movies and the backstory and the character development. And all that stuff was set aside for the priorities of the look and the style. And it was just too much. Like the Shrieking Shack the whole time, it's like, this should, like, really cool performances are going on, and you're so distracted because the whole thing is shaking the whole time like crazy. It's like they're on a boat. And is it like that in the book? I don't think so. Anyway, that's my rant about Prisoner. I'm going to try to be positive.
It's not that I get not liking it compared to the others, but I am just surprised how much you just don't enjoy it. Like, do you skip
one? I don't think I will say watching it, it was like watchable. Those great moments are huge, but I just don't understand why it's so beloved by so many people. Are like, oh, that one's so good, and I'm like, what's going on here? So I think that's why I get so like defensive of being like, nope. And then just like
it stands out in such a way where it's like that difference in style elevates it above. I just think it's well done and it stands in and it works well. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was going to say that I mean, I like all of the movies, right, to a degree that we've talked about, but this is just the one that I happen to like the least, I think. And I do think, like what Jamie said, like, I think it was jarring enough from the style, and then just like, I felt like it was just watching it for, 20th, maybe 50th time in my life, for this podcast was, I know it's going to happen, but it still feels disjointed. It feels like there was, and I guess I could jump ahead and just, there was this, like, any conversation with Lupin that Harry has, like, Harry starts to, like, say something, and Lupin just, like, reads his mind and says, oh, you want to know about this? And then starts, giving this exposition. It's like, what are we doing right now? Like, hold on, show, don't tell. Like, basic rules and things like that I was like, So it irked me enough times during it.
Yeah, but that's a good plant for later on, because that in the later movies, those kind of moments, those conversations are like beautiful. And I feel like that was a plant for that, but it's just awkwardly done, where just the rush of getting out exposition in this movie really took me back to the first movie, which I did not love in the first movie.
That's where I was going to go with it, is that there was a lot of rushed. That was my least favorite thing. There's a lot of rushed talking, like the exchanges between like Harry and Mr. Weasley, Harry and Lupin, like the Shrieking Shack, which is supposed to be this, like, this book is going to benefit so much from it, because even though it's not that much longer than 1 and 2, as the other ones, all jump into being much longer books, there are things that need to be talked about and felt. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'd even say Order of the Phoenix, which is such a long book, it is a lot of talking, is a lot of information that you don't want to rush through, but could probably be surmised. Whereas like Goblet of Fire needs to be long because things are happening, like events, moments, and I think this will really benefit from it. So I did notice, Jamie, you put in the notes that this one made the least amount of money, which is, is that a reflection of quality, or was it not at the peak of its popularity? Like, it is.
And I feel too, different. You think about when the first two came out, Mitchell, you were in elementary school. I was either in elementary school or middle school for the first one. So by now, Steven and I are in high school. So I'm wondering if like some of those kids that like maybe wasn't as cool to go see Harry Potter at that point. Again, the awkward adolescent stage of like going into like teenagedom. I wonder if that had something to do with it. But I was kind of surprised by that as well.
I will say this is one where I was dozing off during the midnight showing. I remember dressing up as a Dementor. I essentially just wore we had wispy black witch robes or something, and I went and I was really sleepy, and so maybe that does say something negative. But let's get through. Let's each pick. I guess you guys probably have more than one. I'm going to point out one thing that really bothers me in the Howler. Jamie's got 47. So, and we'll see. I have a bunch of notes. I'm sure some of them are complaints, but for me, at the very beginning, Harry using Lumos in his bedroom. And then 2 minutes later...
Looks cool, we'll give it that.
Yeah.
It made for a cool way to pop up the title. That was true.
But he's using magic.
And we've kind of learned the whole using magic underage thing. It's weird how they accept it, and then and especially if it's wandless to me and it's incidental because of emotion, I don't think it should be punished. I think that gets a little bit muddled throughout the books, and you also find out how the Ministry can sense it. Like, the Weasleys technically could have been doing magic because their parents were there, so they wouldn't have sensed it. Anyway, it's messy, but it's just funny that 2 minutes later, it's like, oh, he's in trouble for doing magic. I was like, we just saw him doing it under the blanket.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And again, it's just a signal that it was more important to have that fun look than it was like what's actually, and that's literally how the movie starts. It's like, we're going to disregard this huge thing that happened in the last book and this huge thing that's about to happen here, that he gets in trouble for using magic or magic being done in the home. And then it's just Lumos, whatever.
I have one more howling complaint, and it's that you have all these characters in their year. You have Lavender and Pavarti, and you have Dean and you have Seamus, who all kind of get like token moments. But in this one, they chose to give 3 or 4 of the critical lines to some random guy who just wanted to be ominous.
But he does so well. He's the scariest guy.
He was great. And he's been on TikTok now being like, yeah, I don't know, it was just that guy. And then they cast Parvati Patil in this. And even though you knew she kind of had a bigger, not big, but a bigger role in the next one and was in order. It's interesting that they changed that casting in between. I was like, that poor girl could have been at the Yule Ball the next thing, but it was just odd to give the lower end characters less to do. Neville doesn't have much to do in this one, whereas you can start, this should be one where, even though he doesn't have a lot to do in the book, you could start building him up. He could maybe have some of those thoughts in the middle. I did think some of the cast, like the one-off casting for the kids, I think this is one where we can improve by building some of those relationships. But you guys howl away.
Okay, so I'll give the first few of mine. The worst scene to me in this one, which is like, ick, is the McGonagall Rosmerder fudge scene. It's just like this awkward rush exposition. It's like Harry walks in right in time to hear all this, and it's a little bit like that in the book, but it's like we got to get this all out, and this, and it's like it's so out of character for McGonagall. Anyway, but that's one of my worst moments of the book. I actually cringed during that and kind of fast forward sometimes. Okay, but the things that really make me mad, the Dementors just sucking souls immediately, going for Harry's soul. That's supposed to be such a big thing at the end. Not really doing enough of the backstory of the Marauders and just that whole thing. And I understand kind of dropping some of that because it's really big in this book, but there's important elements in other books, but this is where it really lies. Ron in general, I go back and forth with this. Some ways in the books they make Ron actually a better person, but in this they kind of give some of the crueler lines about Hermione to Ron, and I don't like that. And they just things that redeem Ron, they take away. And I actually think he's the best actor of the trio, so I don't love that. But those are my biggest ones.
I think Daniel Radcliffe I don't know if takes a step back is a word, but he has a couple real questionable ones. But of course his character is growing, so he's being asked to do different things. But yeah, some of his readings get frustrating. So yeah, it's interesting to think that if they're not setting the others up for success, and they do start to hint at the Hermione-Ron relationship a little bit here.
Yeah, they do.
They're 13. It's fun to have a little bit of this now, although I just still never caught that relationship at all. Hermione and Harry shipper for life. But Stephen, what did you think was the most critical Howland mistakes?
I don't know if it was the most critical, but I actually wrote down what Jamie had said too about Ron, because I feel like there was this whiplash. There was this kind of, he's given some part, make him look pretty, I don't know, terrible. But then at the same time, Hermione is almost grabbing his hand at one point, and it's kind of she's falling for him, but he's not being shown in a good light. I felt that was kind of weird. It was what's actually going on with this character?
And just the scene where Snape insults her. In the book, Ron defends her, and here he's like, he's kind of right. And I'm like, okay, butthole. Let's be nice. Anyway, go
on. Oh shoot, my notes, I'm getting confused here. Oh, I put a lot of the exposition, I think, was what most of my notes come down to. We were talking about, there's a scene where Harry goes to Lupin and says, "Can I ask you something?" And Lupin goes, "Oh, you want to know why I didn't let you, to fight the bugger?" It's well, hang on a second. And then he just starts spitting out all this other information that Harry didn't even ask for, which we need, but at the same time, it's this doesn't seem natural. And that also is a really important conversation, because that's where they build the trust. That's where Harry comes to understand that Lupin cares about him, and he's wanting to make him feel better, and that he was actually didn't let him do that for a very good reason. And there's this level of I'd say trust and caring about him, but also allowing him to go do the things that he needs to do. A little Dumbledore-esque, right? That never actually gets established. So for me, the rest of the movies, why do him and Lupin like each other so much? That bond to me never actually was created in this movie, and that's where this is Lupin's big film, right? So that was one of my biggest things. But really, I wrote kind of a lot of funny things that I liked about earlier in the first two acts, and then my note was just the whole third act. That is kind of where I feel it really broke down, and all of the time where things are supposed to become clearer, and you're supposed to get all this information. And I get that it's hard, like Jamie said before, is that it's a lot of talking, and it's a lot of explaining things. It's not a lot of action and fighting and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm really hopeful they can do it better in the series, I guess, so they can make it clearer, and the time travel piece actually make a little bit of sense for some folks.
And I feel it's trying to give the magic elements and stuff that I wanted from the other two. There's fun moments in this one of that kind of stuff, which I do think plant for more stuff in the future, which I do like, but it just feels off balance. And I just think it's trying to overcorrect in some ways, and then it's going too much. But overall, it's over stylized everything. The whole production of we're up on this hill now, which kind of just stays that way. But I'm like, the Whomping Willow, I'm like, how did they drive around that thing in the last movie? It's all like rocky and hilly. It looks completely different. And then like the cuts, the fades to black, the like, I don't know what you call those when you fade like in a circle and you fade back out. Like, why are we doing that? It's so distracting what's going on.
In Star Wars.
This is Harry Potter. Just kidding. But it just feels like there was a lot of like stuff that I don't understand why they did that. And even like someone who went to film school, like you're kind of taught not to do that stuff because it makes things feel so dated. So I'm like, why were these decisions made? And it almost feels like they're covering up for something, but there's really not. Like you could have just cut to like the crow instead of fading in and out on whatever to the crow. So things like that I don't really get, but I appreciate the artistry of it and trying to do something new, and that it wasn't just like a boring cut from here to here kind of thing. Anyway,
I think
we can go to positive.
Yeah, if we go to pensive, something that could have been changed is like they just didn't need to change the grounds. Like it very rarely felt like it needed to look and feel that different as a layout to get what they needed. And like there's a courtyard out in front of the entrance hall or the Great Hall, and that's where like Harry flies out at the end, and there's one other scene there. That could have been done somewhere that already existed. Hagrid's Hill? Well, maybe it is.
It's a giant hill. Those kids, no, they don't need PE or anything. They're in shape. They got to run up those hills all the time. I was exhausted for them.
It didn't need to change. I think it was the positioning and feeling that it was jarring. I'd say the one thing that, maybe transitions are the way to do it, because if there's something that I think could have easily been adjusted, it is some of the flow. Some of the plot felt like you could tell Alfonso Cuaron just didn't care about certain things or didn't think they were interesting, and he made some, for lack of a better word, set pieces that were interesting. And sometimes the way that the film transitioned through, it didn't have a lot of flow. And I think that's something that would not taken a line here or there to try and make some of those adjustments. One of the things I did like about it is the music, which is very different from the other films, even though it's done by John Williams. But there's like some classic tunes that we're used to, like when Aunt Marge is going away, and then it's a big choice while the Bogart's out to have Lupin playing that music and to keep the ominous feeling, but also have it be like this silly moment. There's also the moment when they're all trying the candies at the beginning when they
I think that's fun.
That is a moment that I think we need in the TV show, is more of those bonding bits. So I think if some of that could have just flowed a little bit better, and then obviously I generally like the movie and the mood. It's a little bit chaotic, but I think it looks and feels pretty cool.
I will say it feels, I think that's what it is. It feels that like chaotic rush, like the dialogue that's like that. The movie kind of feels like, but then there's weird moments where we're like taking these big shots of the grounds, which are beautiful, but it's like, could we cut that like a few seconds shorter and like been able to talk a little more about this? Which I wonder with Cuarón, because I feel like he's really good at dialogue and like directing dialogue in those moments. I wonder if he tried to do that and he was pressured into like more big set pieces or felt that way because he had never directed anything this huge before. Like he had to do that. So I don't completely blame him. I know there's a lot of pressure from studio or from like outside opinion and picking up on where someone else left off. I just feel like David Yates picked up on everything when he starts taking over the movies. And he incorporates all that, and it's really cool how he does that. So it's just having that comparison is kind of working against.
Well, I think it's cool too because it's a part of like the understanding your fan base, right? Because I think you had your first two movies with Chris Columbus, you had this departure, which arguably veered too far outside of the norm, right? And then with 4 and 5, I think they kind of pull it back in, right? And they find that balance. David Yates came on with the benefit of being 5 movies in or 4 movies in, and he also, just as a more experienced director, possibly he knew where to hit, where to put things, how far to diverge from what was already established and still keep it interesting, right, without being dull or repetitive. So I think that this movie does get credit for that, right, and that they took a risk, and I think they saw like, hey, this one didn't make as much money as the others. So on 4, I think they reeled it in a little bit, and on 5 even a little bit more.
Well, and it might have not made as much
merits for sure.
It might have not made as much money because a lot of people might have not liked Chamber of Secrets, and so they were like, "Oh, I'm not going to go see the next one." So it might have been their fault.
True.
You never
blame Chris.
And to say for 4, Mike Newell comes in, and we'll break this down more because I think each of these think it's going to start easier to explore these because there's just so many intricacies of these stories that now start to get left out and everything. The tone is so different. It's a summer film. It's a brighter film. They all have long hair. I actually kind of like the jarring feeling of how different these two movies are, 3 and 4. Like, I don't know. I just think it's the same world, the same things, but they take wildly different approaches to it. And for whatever reason, that works for me. Whereas David Yates makes a few key changes among each of his movies, and he brings it together really well. And he was a consistent good hand. And I think it is good that they eventually landed on someone to keep it together. But I was like, oh, did I miss not having them bring in some other director to try and to play in the sandbox a little bit? Maybe.
And can I just say, does every kid need to look that disheveled? Like, I get some of them, but it's like that scene, the hippogriff scene. I'm like, their ties are all up here, like half untucked. Everyone crazy hair. I'm like, some of these kids are gonna be dressed nicely.
We didn't grow up with school uniforms, but of course now my wife is a teacher, and so they're really strict about that kind of thing here. And I see kids around in uniforms all the time. It's still quite jarring, and it is just funny because I know she watches it and she's like, "That little bastard with his tie, he better tuck that shirt."
She's Umbridge.
All right, you guys both give one more positive element here. Thing you liked about the movie.
I actually have a good list of positives I want to go through.
Okay,
so first, no, real quick. Sorry, I'll be quick. They're nothing complicated. The first one was that they used the word bitch and they used it properly, and I was like, I love it whenever a movie can pull that off. Yeah, it is in the book. You're right, but she like creatively uses it literally to refer to a female dog, but also Harry's mom at the same time. So it's like tricky bitch. But it was pretty funny. I always think it's hilarious when they use swear words correctly in a movie. But actually, other things like the Monster Book of Monsters, I thought that was really cool. I like the idea of it and the look that they came up with. The Dementors I like in this movie better than I like in the other movies, where they get a little more wispy and everything like this. This time they seem a little bit more, I don't know, solid in this movie, and they go a little away from that in future ones. Riding Buckbeak, I thought that was a really cool magical moment where Harry's flying over and you see that you just kind of, that's that like, man, magic is cool kind of, moment that they really nailed. And so I like that.
I remember not liking that in the theater because I was like,
yeah,
he just kind of flies around the paddock. Why is he going over the lake? Why are they making such a show of this? This is lies for cinema. Anyway, go on.
But it is like kind of like that, right? It reminds me of like Game of Thrones in the later seasons where their whole budget went to these long dragon scenes instead of like, sticking to like actual useful scenes. So there was a little bit of, complication or in my brain there about that. But I did think it was a cool way to kind of show the magic. I think that's it. Oh, the last one was Aunt Marge floating away over the city because Harry's like leaving the house and you like see her way out there and like, that got a good laugh out of me because I totally forgot that happened, but it was a nice one.
Well, they look like animatronics on the ground, like he's like doing this, and she's like, eh. I'm like, oh, they could just set that up at the studio too, or do animatronics.
Vernon probably thought she was dead. He was probably like, yeah, she's gone. She doesn't survive that.
She's floating into space.
Killed my sister, dude.
Which, do you guys care if I floated into space? Okay. So I had the fun scenes, like you talk about the dorm, the trying the candies, the bug art lesson. I think was cool, even though it's bugs me a little bit that like it almost feels like Harry gets to choose what the bug art turns into. But anyway, the Buckbeak thing I mentioned, which I do, and there's a lot of things like this. I think that bugged me when I watched it, but now like I'm like I get why they did that. It's a cool like cinematic moment. The fat lady, just her whole performance and all that stuff with Sirius, I thought was fun. I like the plan of the Dementors floating outside the school, although overall what's a big part that's missing to me about the film is like their presence in that like they're guarding everything. It just feels like they're sucking the joy out of everything, which happens later on. But that does plant that for later movies where they are, again, floating outside the thing, which I like that effect. I like that they show ghosts a little more, and you see a little hint of the Headless Huntsman. I feel like he did go back and maybe add that in because he did say he read the books and liked them. So maybe he's like, let's give them a little taste of the Headless Huntsman running around the school. And I think that's it.
Wow.
I think that's it.
I do want to add the casting in this, like Trelawney, Lupin, Pettigrew, Sirius Black, really strong. All those were additions. Even
Yes, I
Mr.
agree.
Weasley gets a little bit more to do here. But I think when I was watching the scene with Alan Rickman and Gary Oldman, I was like, you know, for as rushed and like we didn't maybe get the Shrieking Shack sequence that we wanted, you got to think that is such a massive caliber of actor
It's so
exchanging the children's book dialogue in that, like, we didn't know how good we had it. And that's like, if they were using the best of the best then, we'll be interesting to see if they go after A-listers now, but it is a different ask to do a TV show instead of a film. So let's move into the TV show. I have a few film notes that I'm going to need to address as we go on here, but let's move towards the television show and just what are the key things that need to be expanded. How many episodes do you think we've kind of done this, but how many episodes do you think this should be in comparison to maybe 2 and 4? Because it is a little bit a uniquely length book. It's the only one of its length. 1 and 2 are very similar, and then 4 through 7 are very similar. So yeah, how long is this season? What are the key things that are going to expand and we're going to see better to make it a better adaptation of the story?
You didn't mention the Marauders map, and we actually have the Marauders in this movie.
Oh, love the Marauders.
Okay, so for me, a big thing that disappointed me about this movie when I first saw it, and I understand why they save time, but it's Harry hanging out in Diagon Alley, which is like, I just love that moment in the book. It's really world building. I just think it's so sweet how like kind people are to him and plants the firebolt and everything, which is kind of just shoved to the end of this movie. But I want more of that, which they'll like, obviously another format, so they'll have more time for that. I want more nuance of Snape and his relationship. This is like the plant of the backstory with Snape and the family. Ron and Hermione being built up. I actually think performances by those two get a lot better in this movie, but just in general. And then I like how it hints at their relationship and stuff that they should be. And then just the Marauders overall and Harry's connection to them. And I don't know, because when I watched this movie, I was like, if I hadn't read the books, I'd be like, why isn't this guy checking in on this kid who was his best friend's son, like Lupin wise? I know he's dealing with being a werewolf, but there's things he could do. So just building on more of that stuff. Even maybe a full episode going into the backstory of the Marauders and Lupin in general. I would see this being a good 10 to 13 episode. Like I want a lot, and I think it could be a little long and boring if they did 13, but there's a lot of information in this series and less set pieces than what's going to come in the next couple books.
I think I'd be surprised if they do more than 10 or 12. 12 would probably be the max, but they could do like a 6 and 6. And, you know, if they had something smaller they could do, I think why not? Because there are a couple opportunities. Yeah, because we learn about Lupin, but we could flash back to it. I think Lupin and Harry's relationship, I know you guys both had huge issues within the movie. That is something that could be built so much better. Lupin's werewolfness seems so obvious to me now. And I know I read this when I was like 8, so of course I might not have caught on, but I don't know, is it worth building that up as a mystery? And the other thing is Harry, one thing that really sticks with me is this felt like a full 2-3 terms of school. Like he talks about the different sections of divination that they go through. He's like, oh, this term we're doing the mugs, and this one we're doing the tea leaves are the mugs, aren't they? Anyway, the crystal ball is the last one. Like, I actually want to see that passage of time, and I think that's going to help like an interesting character like Trelawney, like Lupin, be built up through this. And yeah, the more background we get for Lupin, the more of a payoff that there is with anything to do with the Marauders. I think there's just so many interesting places for them to sit and develop with these. Also, seeing Hermione disappear at times and navigate that schedule and the boys not really know what's going on, I think that could also be way more effective for a reveal. Even though, like, look, yes, we can't change that time travel as part of the series, and that's a really hard one to navigate. I just think there are all these little individual characters and plots that can be expanded. And, you know, they can keep some random things. Maybe this is the movie where Professor Flitwick gets a makeover and directs the choir. That's not that important to me.
Well, and it's like that B storyline of like, you know, obviously the A story is that Sirius is on the loose and after Harry and they're trying to figure that out. But Ron's really invested into like what's going on with Hermione a lot of the time. So like you can show so much about his character and Hermione throughout that. And Hermione's more of a mystery in this book most of the time. And so because she's so busy, which I don't really feel like you feel that. So there's a lot of things they could do there where they kind of maybe separate the trio a little bit more in trying to figure stuff out.
Yeah, in this movie, she's in pretty much every scene that Harry and Ron are in, right? It doesn't feel like she's ever missing or off on her own or any of that kind of stuff. And so I think they could do some fun stuff with her disappearing.
One of the only books where neither of the other two members of the trio have an extended absence, because in 2, she gets petrified. In 1, she's not even part of the gang. Ron disappears for bits because he gets bitten by Norbit. Watching too many Eddie Murphy things recently. But Harry and Ron get in a big fight in number 4. Like, it is interesting that this is the one where they really, should have been cemented always as a trio. And yeah, they don't give her a ton to do. I do like when she says in the film, does the back of my hair really look like that?
No, but I think she actually should be missing more from the film because she is popping in and out so much that they're like, what's going on with Hermione? And Harry's like, I don't have time to freaking think about that. There's some guy trying to murder me. So.
Well, it's funny because arguably as I think more about what Mitchell said, like she wouldn't be missing that much, but she's in 2 places at once, sometimes 3 places at once, right? So I wonder if there's a way to play with that and be like, hey, here's a shot in this classroom and Hermione's there, and then there's a shot at the same time with Harry, Ron, in this class, and you don't realize until the end of the season, like, oh, those took place at the, where you get those shows where, like The Witcher, where you're like, oh, the timeline, that wasn't actually concurrent. There could be some cool stuff they could play with Hermione and be like, oh, she was actually in 2 places at one time.
The Witcher season 1 is the worst timeline jumping execution in. It is so frustrating. And then season 2, I kind of lost interest, even though it was more chronological. So maybe that is on me. I think of Dunkirk, where you have 3 distinct storylines at different paces. I love the way they come together. But like, time travel is not going to get better than Back to the Future and Endgame. They still have huge plot holes. But what's funny is the time travel is not the biggest plot hole in this. It is the Marauders map. Like, come on, Fred and George. But you have to let it go. It's a kid.
You guys missed a lot of stuff with that.
Jamie, do you have a Marauders map and a time turner?
Yes, but I don't know where my Marauders map is.
That's a cool piece of magic introduced in this book that Jamie has.
Oh, my Marauders map is way up here in a box. I can see it. But my time turner is right here. And also, how huge the time turner is. I just didn't imagine it that big
when she
how would she ever hide that in there? You gotta have some cleavage to hide that in there.
Where did all that extra chain come from?
Yeah, it's like,
it's like how all 3 14-year-olds fit under the invisibility cloak.
This is post-puberty, people.
You gotta forgive some
mid-puberty,
things,
maybe.
But yeah.
Anything else? Oh, Steven, did you say?
Well, I was just my big thing. You guys talked about a lot of it. Is 2 expands on the world, but this is where 3 really it really starts to flesh this out, where you start to realize, like, okay, there's a lot of context about before. It's not just that Voldemort was bad. It was that there were all these people involved, right? And like one of their best friends turned on them as a result of him, torturing him and threatening him and things like that, right? It adds just this other layer of depth of like, okay, this is some really complex stuff. And that's something that I feel is completely breezed over, right, in the movie. So I think that's where it comes from, is like experience a little bit more outside of Hogwarts. Like, I think there's really some cool potential for some good flashback scenes because if the Shrieking Shack is too boring and people just talking, like, can we get actual flashbacks to Sirius, blowing up the street and Peter being there and cutting off like some of that kind of stuff? I think it'd be a cooler way to play it, where you can get some of that action in that way. But I also I would love a bottle episode about like the Marauders and stuff. How do we insert that as one of our episodes? I don't know that we'd go over 10, but I think 9 or 10 would be a good number of episodes in order to get the whole story out there.
If they're doing for season 1, yeah, it really makes sense to go to 10 or 12.
Well, and even when I reread the books, because I'm always listening or rereading the books, sometimes when I get to like the time turner, I'm like, oh, I have to go through all of this over again. But you kind of want them to have the time to do that correctly. And it is cool. Like, if you haven't read the books or you don't know, it is cool how they're affecting what's going on. I mean, not hitting each other with rocks, but like stuff like that.
Yeah, it is well done. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I remember this movie, watching it the first time with friends who had not read the books. And like, I literally spent an hour after the movie was over explaining to them what all was going on because they were so confused.
This is the
Like,
first one.
It's got to be clearer.
Yeah, this is the first one where I'm like, how do people really get what's going on here if they didn't read the book?
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm always surprised. I'm like, you love that. I'm like, do you know what's happening? Do you understand?
Well,
I'm just
and I
a
think,
nerd.
yeah, it can be confusing. And with the Lupin stuff, it connects to Harry's parents. And like, I think there's just an emotional beat that's going to get explored somewhere in the TV show that they couldn't quite get into in the movie. Like, the Dementors represent depression. Chocolate is pure, turns out, but you can really be like, why is Harry's trauma affect him this way? How does that build his relationship with Lupin? How does it change his relationship with his friends? Because he kind of has he almost foreshadows what's going to happen in Order of Phoenix when he feels really moody and isolated. Like, a lot of that connects to this one here. I do think it's funny when he's in the movie trying to produce his first Patronus, and Lupin's like, what was the memory? It's like, my first time flying the broom. And Lupin's like, that's not good enough. Be happy. And Harry's like, I don't have that many happy memories.
That's what I said to my husband. I'm like, yeah, this kid who's been living in an abusive situation his whole life, like, let that be his happy memory. His happy memory ends up being not even being like his own real memory.
It's true. How do you feel about that, Lupin? He's trapped into your best friend's kid.
But I do
abused
think,
his whole life, and you did nothing.
Like you said, Mitchell, I think for a lot of people, 5 is like just jolting in general because Harry is like down a lot of the book. That's like my favorite book because I do feel like it's justified, like that this kid is going through all this, and then there's like an evil dude up in his head. But this really starts planting that. It's like his scars starting to really hurt. Just all these different elements that like can make that leap into like the depressed Harry more understandable. It's like all this stuff's going on. No one's really explained this to him. No one's really there by his side. And there's this whole, he's figuring out all this stuff about his dad, which also in 5 will kind of pay off later on. And I think building up Snape in this book is really important too. Like, the Marauders seem like the hero here, but what happens later on and why Snape is the way he is, or, whatever.
I think it's important to note in this film, they win the Quidditch Cup. And
Wood!
That kind of gets ignored. Yeah, Wood gets his send-off, gets his moment. I think seeing Harry balance, like, the trauma and the developing plot that's going to thicken, and that weight, also with just being a kid, being a jock, seeing that balance come out over time, we kind of forget about that. Also, Harry gets the Firebolt, and in the dumb movie, me calling it the dumb movie, I like it. He gets at the very end, whereas actually Hermione and Ron kind of fighting over the Firebolt, and her having still a bit more loyalty to the rules than to them in some ways. I think that is like, that's just good kids drama. Like, that can really divide you and frustrate you. And then seeing Harry win and have this whole other group of people in his Quidditch team, I think seeing that moment could be interesting.
Can I just say, also, when I just thought about this, sorry. When he like sneaks into Hogsmeade and he's walking around and he gets really upset after he hears them talking about what Sirius did.
Yeah.
He knocks over a choir of little people.
I thought,
what was with that?
I couldn't believe they cast a choir of little people for him
and
to
then
run.
He just shoves them over. I was like, anyway, I just remembered that. I'm just like,
I must have been checking my phone when that happened or something. I didn't see that
so
at
mad.
all.
It's like knockovers, like, like Draco or someone, not these poor people singing.
I wanted that sequence to be like the book, where like they're actually just in a booth and there's more than just Hagrid and McGonagall, and the way Harry overhears it, and Hermione and Ron also overhear it. And I think Harry's emotional reaction to it in the film is one of Daniel's less proud moments in that one.
He was the friend!
Yeah. But we need to see that.
Wait, one other thing though, mentioning knocking over Malfoy, one of the best parts of this entire film though is Hermione punching Malfoy. Right. That was so satisfying. I mean, I know like he's just such a little cretin, and then like there's spells and there's insults and stuff, but like watching him actually get socked in the face was very nice. So I hope they keep that.
And I also hope they just end on the note of like Harry, and I feel like they tried to do this a little in the movie, and it's okay, but Harry really feeling like Sirius is going to save him. Like the bond between Harry and Sirius for me is huge. Like in the books, And I just want to feel that more. And even Sirius sending him the note signed that he can go to Hogsmeade, like, I just love that moment because it's like, finally, this kid's going to have like a parental type person in his life. And you're like, there's so much hope there at the end of this movie. I really, really hope that they pay that off.
Well, and that's another one of those relationship building things where like Sirius in book 5 is just so much more powerful because you get kind of this, Harry has family now and he has like that hope, and I feel like it's not explored very well in the 4th or maybe the 5th movie to an extent, but it's not quite the same. So yeah, I think that part of like, I could go live with you, like I have an actual home I want to go to.
And I
like,
remember being so excited for that. Like I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to get out of the Dursleys. And I mean, this is the last book to kind of end with hope. So it's like, let's feel that a little bit because it goes downhill.
I think it is a fine line, Harry turning from Sirius needs to be sinister and like what you fear until you find out that he's a good person. Like, and it is a fine line for Harry then to make progress and I want to live with this guy. But that's how much we kind of hate the Dursleys, which it'll also help if we spend a little bit more time with the Dursleys and see Harry still miserable. I think in this one, doesn't he get like a tissue paper or something for his gift from them?
Oh yeah.
Tissue,
I recently saw, I think it was a TikTok about how the gifts that the Dursleys kind of get him match up with the Deathly Hallows, which I thought was interesting.
That,
But and I will say too, with the Sirius thing, so as you grow up with the books, they become more and more complex and more like adult themes. And this book is like a major part of that. But there's this innocence planted that Harry trusts him so much just immediately because he wants to so bad. And like the whole not having them kill Pettigrew because he's like, my dad wouldn't want that. When maybe his dad would have. The innocence of Harry is so tied up that. And then like in 5, we kind of see like, well, Mary Sirius isn't making the best decisions for Harry. And maybe he doesn't understand. And you kind of see that through Molly. But to plant that here, so you kind of get that payoff with Sirius. And it's like Dumbledore. It's like all these adults in his life, the relationship gets more complicated and complex because Harry's getting older and he's realizing that. Like, it's like the day you figure out that your parents are people and not just mom and dad, and you're like, oh, they have flaws and they're doing this.
They don't know everything.
You have those moments with Harry throughout the books and it's like, let's plant and pay those off more because that's how you mature alongside Harry.
And when you think Sirius does not actually have that much page time or screen time definitely screen time. In the 4th, he's literally in a fire for a bit. I think they're actually going to need to shoehorn him into Goblet of Fire a little bit more. But every one of his little correspondences with Harry about the tournament, he's the one who kind of tells Harry about how things were before the war. Like, each of those matters so much. And yeah, it is great how he gets built up, and then he gets humanized a little bit, but he's still so important to Harry. It's actually like a great character arc over 3 books when he's really only in the end of the 3rd one, a snippet of the 4th, and then the 5th where, spoiler, he croaks. But I think it's worth investing in. Jamie, you sent an idea in for a Sirius Black casting today. Do you want to?
Oh yeah. Well, I just was reading an article because it keeps being all these articles about who people are saying.
Yeah, the algorithm is caught on.
Yeah, but it's always like usually the same people, and maybe this has gone around. I just haven't seen it.
I think I saw it.
What's his name? Oh, but Ben Barnes, who, and Mitch has a point. I think he's a little old now for the role, but like when I look at him, I'm like, that's actually a lot kind of how I imagined.
43,
Sirius.
but he's not. He doesn't look as. I mean, Gerald looked much older when he was.
Yeah. And I mean, I love him in Prince Caspian. I'm trying to think of like fantasy things with him, but
he plays.
He could be good.
I only watched season 1. I have not read the books, but it is called Shadow and Bone on Netflix, and he plays one of the main characters. And it's a little over the top, but he could be good. I don't think it's a bad call at all.
Sirius is just. I mean, you ask most people who are fans of the series who their favorite character, and a lot of them say Sirius. Like it's a big role, and like you were saying, Mitchell, he's like not actually in it that much, but his presence in this book is so looming. Like you feel it the whole time, which I think the movie's missing. And then even in the 4th, it's just the idea that Harry's constantly thinking about, oh, I need to write to Sirius about this. I need to let him know this, that he is that person that's caring about Harry and in a good way is like helping Harry when, especially when it comes to the Triwizard Cup, there's other people helping these kids out, but no one's really helping Harry. I mean, Mad Eye, whatever, but it's complicated. But Sirius is that person for Harry.
Sirius is important. He was one of my favorite characters for sure, and Hannah's already turned down the name Sirius Marshall. So
I almost named my dog Sirius Black, and I kind of should have because he does look like Sirius Black as a dog.
He does actually. He's a very small version.
Nice dog.
Well, Lupin was like one of my favorite characters in the book, but now one of those people as I've grown up, I'm like, dude, you should have been there more for this kid. But
also, why is he so disheveled? Even if you can't make money, you have magic. And
there's that one part he pops up when Harry gets caught by Snape when he's sneaking around at night, and then Lupin comes in and his like face is all scratched up. I'm like, no one guessed that this guy was doing something weird. I
thought he was. I was too innocent to even realize he was probably just doing heroin, but it's fine.
this professor is addicted to drugs.
It's like everyone really does look scraggly in this because like Peter Pettigrew looks so bad. Now they kind of go with the idea that he's literally been a rat for 13 years. But I'm like, wouldn't you have been like when none of the Weasleys were home, turning back into a human, stretched out, eating some food? I don't know. He
was getting a lot of food. He got chubby.
He was pretty chubby. But no, I just love all those characters, all the Marauders. There's so much depth to them. I mean, like you think about Sirius, for example, like he has to seem unhinged enough, and then as you get to realize like why he's unhinged, you begin to see like, oh no, he's a person who's just ticked off, right, or who's just been screwed over so many times that he's kind of gone too far, and it's just a hard line to walk, and that's where I think having the time is going to be really key. And I've said this every other movie we've talked about, and I'm going to keep saying it, and that's just that I want them to include at least mentioning these characters and stuff, like the one movie or the one book characters before and after, like at the beginning of the first and second books, we kind of just feel like there's only these 5 or 6 subjects and that's it, and then in book 3 it's like, oh no, there's all these other teachers who've been here the whole time, you just didn't notice. But I'd love to just kind of like, how do they mention that in book 1 and 2, and like, oh yeah, no, there's stuff like divination and astronomy, you'll deal with all that stuff later, right? You have these other professors that are around for that, and you see adults in the hallway you don't recognize and stuff like that. I think so much of that is just, it'll help that continuity and just feel like this place has been a whole thing the entire time, and you're just learning about
those professors better be sitting at that table. Year 1.
You know what
I
mean?
Where are you during the
That would be great if they could get them in for, one little shot and then to pop up later.
Well, even if it is just like one really long shot where you can see, there's like 14 people up there, but you only get the close shots of a few. You know what I mean? Like, there's more teachers.
They should add them in later.
The 6
they should, once they cast them, like 2 years later, be like, go back and watch. There's some new Easter eggs.
Well,
just also, like George Lucas, do the remastered version.
I feel like the student size in this one also like triples, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I didn't notice as much as like there's so many kids, but then it does continue with that throughout.
Weirdly, I thought in the Great Hall, when they're all sleeping in the Great Hall, it made the Great Hall look small. It didn't. That
felt small, but when they were like eating or when they're all running around the castle, there's like so many kids, which I think is cool because it feels more like a school. But then at the same time, I'm like, how many kids are actually at Hogwarts?
I don't love the positioning of the fat lady's portrait, but I like them doing the staircase stuff. Felt really, that chaos of student stuff in that felt really cool. Also,
it's like every other house, it's like a mystery where their house is. Gryffindor's just right there, at the top of the stairway.
Everyone to see.
So, speaking of, I do want to make a list of like one book characters to keep track of. I was thinking the Owlry, which is not one book, but I think it's introduced in this one. Also, remember in book 1, there's the broom shed is where Harry's putting his broom away, and that's when he overhears Snape and Quirrell talking in the forest. I was just like, it's dumb to have a broom shed, but it's funny that it's never mentioned again.
And I did like the hint of Cho in this one, even though we don't get to see Quidditch and all that, or like a lot of Quidditch and stuff. But I do like the little like moment on the train where he like is flustered because she said hi.
And this one will have a great tease at the end when they're like, oh, in the Quidditch World Cup, like that really means something when they say, oh, the Quidditch World Cup is this summer, and seeing Harry get away, because the Dursleys completely eliminated from book 4. Poor guy, I think, or movie 4, I mean, and maybe even are they in 5 or 6? They're in one of them, but not the other, or something.
They're in 5 because that's when the Dementors
come
to Little Witching.
Yeah, attack Harry. And
I don't think 6.
So the little alleyway where Dudley and Harry get attacked, like looks like a subway here, which actually just, a road under thing. I was in one that looked just like the other, like the same color, the same neon lighting. And I said it to Hannah and she was like, yeah, it was much smaller, but I was like, watch out for the Dementor.
Oh, can I just say before we end?
Well, I was going to go to the Golden Snitch, so there's going to be more.
But my last complaint, it is a crime to end on a freeze frame. Okay, go on to the Golden Snitch.
Oh, my other complaint was that when they're playing Quidditch, Harry, they're like, he fell from 100 feet. He fell from like 1,000 feet, but then Dumbledore slowed him down. So why does he need to be in the hospital? Anyway, let's move on to the Golden Snitch, which is we can really surmise this to one thing. What is most critical for them to get right to make this a successful adaptation and keep propelling us forward into the next one? And I think we've probably answered this for ourselves, but maybe we can iterate it the best here. Is this book does expand and dig a little bit deeper in ways that, even though it's not directly tied to Voldemort, really sets up so much to come. It does feel like, I think one thing J.K. Rowling does really well is Harry age progresses pretty well. And I think this one did feel like distinctly older than the last one, but I think 4 still, again, feels a little bit older. So what can we do? What can this season do to make itself distinct, better than the film, and propel us forward?
I mean, I think it all comes down to that character development we talked about. I think it's like learning about these people who are going to be really important for the rest of the series. I mean, when Harry gets the Horcrux that, oh my gosh, I can't think of what it's called, the stone, the Deathly Hollow, right? He's able to see the Resurrection Stone. That's it. See, this is me failing. But like the people who appear to him are his dad, Sirius, Lupin, his mom, right? It's like Sirius and Lupin are that important to him. And I feel like that needs to be fleshed out, and then we need to understand why they're important to him and build that relationship, and then just understand the Marauders, like how that connects him to his dad, and how and his mom, and how it connects him to Snape. Frankly, I think all of those things, that's really the foundation of kind of like the story going forward that comes out of this book.
I agree. I think the next book is going to be one of the biggest world building books, but this is such a character world building book where we go outside of, we get to learn more about his parents. So really doing that. And HBO, we know you love to kill people and people are going to die. So make us really sad about it when they die. Don't just like give us peeks of them and then be later on like, you're sad because someone died in the movies, but you don't feel as connected as you kind of feel like you should. So I really think like honing in on these characters, and also again, like Harry's a biggest part of this book for me is Harry's need for love in his life and need for people in his life. And really, again, not to make us all sad and mopey about Harry, but like feeling that for this little 13-year-old boy. This reminded me he's still a kid, even though his hair is all over the place and only gets worse.
Yeah, I'd say expand the world with consistency, build those relationships, build the emotional depth. And this is going to be, our first Hogsmeade. I think Harry not getting to go to Hogsmeade and then his series of trips each mean something different. I think this is, compared to the first two, there's just so many more relationships that are going to benefit from that time. And then to me, the development of, again, like Hermione, Sirius, Trelawney, not that she's that consequential, but like her silliness and then her having predictions. I just think there's so much more that is going to be built. I think we're really seeing the benefit of the time come in to a whole new level. Whereas 1 and 2, probably there's a world where there's really accurate movie depictions of those and you lose some time, but there's even probably really good 4 to 6 episode seasons of those. I think this one needs 8 to 10 to 12 hours. Like it's really going to deserve its time. Stephen, I want to ask real quick before we wrap up, is there something you think they need to do that the movie didn't do in that third act? Like what annoyed you, not what annoyed you the most, we've kind of gone through it, but like what really made it disjointed, whereas this will make it flow a bit better and make sure that the emotional impact is there?
Well, I think the relationships, I think it's believing that Sirius can appear to be this unhinged, crazy person who wants to murder everyone. And then that transition into, once you understand the backstory and why he's so ticked off and how, badly because like we haven't even broach the fact, I don't think we do until the end of book 4, right, that he didn't even actually get a trial in the end, right? He just got shut up to Azkaban because they're so sure that he did it. He really got hosed. And I think that that just feeds into all of this. And then, like, the need to, like, save him, right? And to break wizarding law, to, you know, travel through time and do all of that to save this person because he's that important to Harry and he's that important to the Order. All of that kind of stuff. I think that's, if they can do that and make the time travel make sense, I think the third act can be saved. But I was just thinking through, and a better werewolf. Yeah, the werewolf effect was not good.
Werewolves are hard to get right. I don't think they're done well in almost anything.
It's true. It's true. But no, the thing I was thinking through, just as we were talking through the Golden Stitch in this last piece, is that these have already been books. These have already been movies, right? So, like, people know the story. And I just think, again, of my kids watching this for the first time, and maybe even the ones who haven't read the books yet, right, as they follow through, like, and they wonder, like, what happens in the next episode? What happens in the next season? They can just go Google it, right? And so they have to be able to change some things enough to where it's still intriguing. That's where my brain keeps going, like, what can they change to keep it interesting without drastically changing, you know, the overall story that we need and the characters that we love? Because it's if you want to have that, like, that tension, right, that urge to, like, come back and see the next episode, then you've got to have something different. And again, I don't know if it's, you know, some of those background characters getting side storylines that drive things, or we want to see, like, how that might actually impact what we think is going to happen, and does it still happen that way? I think there's a lot of ways to play with that, but I think that's something else where book 3 really moves into new territory, where there's some room to play with, maybe even just the order of events or something. You know, maybe something from book 4 gets pulled forward, book 3 gets pushed out. You know, there's some of those kinds of things to keep it a little bit fresh, because it has to be. Otherwise, it's just a rewatch, and people will constantly be able to just Google everything about it.
I think you got to keep, because even watching this, I'm like, there's so many things that are left out from the books. So if you
it will feel like a new story in some ways.
Yeah, if you stay faithful to the books, there's so many things that are missing from the movie. But also, you got to think about the adaptation process, between the differences between a book and a TV series. Is that all in one frame and scene? You can have Harry having a conversation with something, and you can have Dean doing something in the background that tells you more about Dean, and there's just maybe a funny moment. But you can tell so much in that visual than you can in a book, because it's not like you have the time to do that when you're in someone's head or you're in the midst of a conversation, to be like, you know, so you can add more of those kind of things. But I do agree that it's going to be about investing more in all the characters, those side characters and people. So you like them, because when you get to the end, to the final battle, you care so much about so many different people, and you're worried for so many different people, even people you haven't really seen in a while, like Colin Creevy. You're like heartbroken about this kid who you just thought was an annoying little kid, but he's grown, and he, you know, like all this kind of stuff. So I agree, but I also disagree. Keep faithful.
I'm a person who should maybe get some scenes that weren't there and make sure he's not just super random. You know, he's in the DA. He could still be Harry's fanboy in 3 and 4. Like, he can be consistently put in. Yeah, like, make me feel every death. You know, I remember thinking in the final book, I really thought Hagrid was going to die, because I was like, some people post Harry have to die. And I remember thinking in the final battle, like, oh, he's going to fight Fenrir maybe, or Bella. Like, and a lot of those, there were some great matchups, as I would say, in the final battle. So, you know, they do need to develop them. But maybe we'll do this as a subject. I sent you guys that Reddit the other day that was like, what should be left out from the books, or should be left out that was in the movies? I think it is worth exploring things that you're like, oh, I don't think this served the character. And maybe we can also explore that as like, what could be a change? You know, maybe we change a character a little bit to help to fill in some space, to create some interest. We'll definitely look at that as maybe a podcast idea, where we each come with something to leave out and something to add that doesn't dramatically change, but maybe gives us another plot to be interested in. I do think there's got to be room for someone who's like, oh, their dad was in the war before, and he's got this story we don't know about. And it may not be the main driver, but it adds more flavor to the show. And there are going to need to be, and it's going to need to be done on a great level where it's good. And people who have only seen the movies, especially, I think, or people who haven't read them in ages and ages, or seen them in ages and ages, are like, oh, there's so much more. This world. And that's the thing, like, J.K. Rowling's not necessarily a hard fantasy. I've been reading a lot of fantasy books recently. She's not necessarily like a straight fantasy writer. Like, her magic system and her world building, well, her world building, not fantasy wise, but plot wise, is really good. But there might be some little bits and spots where they can explore, like when they start getting into the history of magic, like the history of wand lore and stuff. Like maybe there are some interesting places to go with that without taking focus away. But I don't know. I want to say one last thing about Azkaban is this does as good of any property of making me every time want the outcome of a certain moment to be different. And every time I'm like, why can't he just kill Peter, step on him? And it's like, oh,
Can I just say something too that bugs me about the whole thing, about the book, and a major plot hole for me? There is something in between murder and letting him just walk out of there. It's called stunning, and clearly it's not mentioned in this book at all. I'm like, stupefy the man, and you're already carrying Snape out. You got the magic floaty thing down. Do that to this guy. It would have saved so much. Like, you didn't have to kill him, but you could have stunned him until you got to the Dementors. I'm just saying.
It has to happen for the story, but it is painful. Yeah, Sirius. Yeah, you want so badly for Sirius to be free. And I remember thinking, oh, they're going to catch Pettigrew before the grand finale, and Sirius will be a free man as part of this, and he never is. He actually dies quite quickly. And when you think that, like, they almost killed Arthur, and she considered killing Ron, it's really interesting, like, who ends up actually dying when Harry could have been impacted by other losses and ended up with Hermione, as he should have.
No.
Maybe a lot of those deaths will change with the series.
I hope people are watching.
But I do think that might be one of those contrived things we talked about, right? When we talked about Chamber of Secrets, that like could be changed or could be clarified, right? Why they couldn't just stun him or something. I don't know. I'd like that to be able to be a little bit more believable because he does play an important part in Book 4, right, and beyond. Though it's like he kind of needs to get there, so they can't, just catch him and keep him put away forever. But it should make more sense as to why they can't do that or how he gets away.
We need to make a supercut of times where one of us is talking and the other one is shaking their head, or we finish talking and Jamie just goes, no. Next week, we're going to quiz each other. We're each going to come with some questions, and we'll do it in a format where we'll go around and ask each other the questions, and then we'll give the answers after so everyone can participate. And it'll be fun to see some of each of our favorite moments and how we try to trick each other. Also, I haven't been listening to the books, and these can be any question. So
should it be 1 through 3 since we've done those movies, or are we going beyond that?
Yeah, no, let's stick to 1 through 3 and then we can do it again. So a little quiz coming up.
So make sure you submit questions on social media so that you can, maybe we'll go through one of your questions.
If you have a good quiz idea, then let us know when you see it. One of us will pick it up and look up the answer if we don't know it, especially if we think it's going to fool the other two, and we'll incorporate that one in. But again, please reach out to us at hptvpodcast@gmail.com or hptvpod on all social media. We're having a lot of fun trying to do more stuff on TikTok and Reels. So join us there, and we'll, of course, pop in anytime if we get some more news that gets confirmed, although Lithgow's not confirmed. Who knows? And we'll keep being around when fun stuff comes along, and we'll keep potting it up. Sober. I didn't know how to pivot away from marijuana there. But
bring it back to the weed.
Anyway, Jamie, send us away.
Peace out, snitches.